Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am doing a video that I love to watch, and I'm really glad that I'm getting the chance to do it now. So this is going to be my most disappointing reads from 2017. I did a video that was the best books of 2017, which I'll link below if you want to see it, but I decided to choose books that were published in 2017 because I loved so many books from last year that it was really hard to narrow that down. I actually ended up disliking or being disappointed by far fewer books last year, so I opened that up to any year of publication as long as I read it in 2017. So when I say books that I was disappointed by, I mean books that I had really high expectations for. I went in really wanting to love them, and I just didn't. This doesn't necessarily mean that these are my lowest rated books of 2017. They're not books that I absolutely despise necessarily. I really hated very few books that I read last year, and actually my least favorite book is not even on this list because I went into A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas knowing I would probably not like it, and I wasn't disappointed. I really didn't like it. So you won't see anything like that here. This is because these videos always seem to need a disclaimer. Even though you are all very smart, wonderful, beautiful people, you don't need this disclaimer, I know, but this is my opinion. If you see a book that you love on this list, which chances are you will, because there's one in particular that I'm a little worried about talking about, but if you see one of your favorite books here, that does not mean it is a bad book. That doesn't mean you should feel bad for liking it. It just means I didn't particularly like it, and we should have a conversation about that. That would be cool. So I'm going to start off with a book that was not published in 2017. This is actually a much older book. It is one of the kind of first YA fantasies that I had ever heard about, and now that I started reading YA fantasy in 2017, I decided I wanted to give it a shot, and I started out liking it, and then it took a huge nosedive for me for several reasons. So that was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. So Daughter of Smoke and Bone follows Kaoru. I'm going to say a lot of these names wrong. For the most part, some of them I'm saying for the very first time out loud, so I apologize. But this book follows Kaoru, who lives in Prague. She's an art student. She's very fabulous. She's got blue hair, and she's very cool. She's a wonderful artist, but she's kind of living a double life. On the one hand, she's going to this wonderful art school, and she has very normal human friends, and on the other hand, she's almost like a messenger for the beasts that raised her. They're called Chimera. So bad things start to happen to her family of Chimera, and she wants to figure out what exactly is going on. There's obviously larger things afoot here. I started out really disliking Kaoru. She really needed to grow on me, and you know what? She did. She went from me expecting her to be this kind of like manic pixie dream girl, which is something I absolutely despise, and she turned out to be a really cool character. So you can imagine my disappointment when the love interest shows up and she goes from really cool kick-ass heroine to just puddle of water who just wants to make out all the time. It was so infuriating. I hated the romance in this book because she falls for a guy who, I'm not kidding, has nothing going for him except the fact that he's hot. That's it. He doesn't even seem like a particularly good person or being, whatever you want to call him, but it was just everything that I hate about romance, and particularly YA romance, because I see this kind of thing happening a lot. You have these amazing female characters, and as soon as a boy comes along, they just turn into wilting flowers, and it's so frustrating. The other thing that I really didn't like about this book, and I think that people who have read this know exactly what I'm talking about, is that you get the main narrative, and it goes on and on, everything is great, and then all of a sudden it stops and it cuts off about 100 pages from the end, and you get about 90 pages of just info dump backstory. You don't get to revisit the characters who you've spent like 300 pages with. It just goes into backstory, things that happened before the events of this book even took place, and it was so jarring, and all I wanted was to go back to Kaoru and Prague and seeing exactly what's going on with the story, and it's so upsetting. It made me so angry because you do go back and there's like 5-10 pages at the end where you're back with the main characters and you kind of have a better idea of what's going on, and then the book ends. Just like, what? It was made me, sure you can probably tell, it made me so angry. It's just a horrible, to me, was a horrible way of going about this. I hate info dumps, like I feel most readers probably do. I feel like there must have been a much, much better way of telling that particular story, and she just didn't go for it. So the next book on the list was actually published in 2017. It was published, I believe, in October, and I was very lucky to have gotten a proof copy of this book at Yelk, and it was one of my most highly anticipated books from Yelk, and I was really disappointed. So that is There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. So There's Someone Inside Your House was sort of billed as a 90s teen slasher movie meets YA romance, which sounds awesome to me personally. I am very much a child of the 90s, and I grew up watching things like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I love those movies so much even to this day, so I was really excited to get this book. So this book follows Makani, who has just moved from Hawaii to Nebraska, somewhere in the Midwest. Very, very big change. So as she's kind of adjusting to a new school and making some new friends and falling in love with a boy, someone's killing off the teenagers in her school. And it's really, really gruesome. The opening scene of this book is one of these murders, and it's very gruesome, and I was like, yes, I'm very excited for this. And then it turned out that this book, I shouldn't have been surprised, but this book turned out to be like 80% making out and like 20% slashy death murder, which I didn't know. Stephanie Perkins has written a bunch of very kind of super sweet YA contemporary romances. This was the first book of hers that I read. So I guess if I had known that, I might have had slightly different expectations, but this book was not what I was expecting. The big problem that I had with this book, and this is a small spoiler, just as a heads up, you can skip ahead a few seconds, but you find out who the murderer is midway through the book. This is not exactly a long book either, and I kept waiting for the twist, waiting for this person to not actually be the murderer, and maybe they're somehow going to make this much more interesting. No, you find out who the murderer is, and then it gets really boring from there. And I'm sorry, a teen slasher book should not be boring. So the next book on this list is probably the biggest victim of hype for me this year. You could not be on Twitter or Instagram or any kind of bookish social media without hearing about this book in the months leading up to publication. There was so much hype surrounding it. It was getting these amazing early reviews. People were so excited. It's a beautiful cover. It just was gonna be incredible. I think the hype really killed my enjoyment of this book, sadly. So this next one is Caravelle by Stephanie Garber. First of all, let's take a moment to appreciate how lovely this is. Seriously, this is one of my favorite covers of the year. I really love this very much. So Caravelle follows two sisters, Scarlett and Tella, and Scarlett has always been the kind of very cautious older sister, and Tella is much more sort of flighty and spontaneous. And there is this incredible, almost circus game type event that travels around the islands that they are from. It's called Caravelle. So they end up getting mixed up in Caravelle. It's a very dangerous game. It's very kind of mysterious and magical, and it had the formula to be incredible. I was so looking forward to this. I kept seeing on Instagram, for example, I think Instagram was the worst for this, that people were raving about this incredible twist at the end, and it's so twisty and turny, you're not going to expect anything that happens in this book. And that wasn't the case. I mean, it was fine. It was decent. I probably, I think I gave it like 3 stars, 3.5 stars, I don't know, but I was expecting this to be a 5-star book, best book of the year, and from the way that people were hyping it up, it really should have been. But you know what? It was okay. It was just okay, and that was so disappointing. I feel genuinely let down by this book. So I do think this is the only book on the list that I might actually reread now that the hype has kind of died down a lot. I think that it might benefit from a second reading for me, particularly because the next book in the series is coming out, and that's the book that will focus on Tella. So Caravelle and I might have a little date sometime soon, but for now, it's just gonna sit on the shelf and be sad. So this next book I actually don't have a physical copy of. I read it as a digital ARC from NetGalley, so I'm going to attempt to show you what the cover looks like on my iPad. We'll see if this works or not. But I read another book by this author that was published before 2017, and I loved it so much. And I read that book in preparation for this one that's coming up. And I wish I hadn't, because I feel like I might have enjoyed this one much more. However, the differences between the two books were pretty staggering, and her other book won out. This one was really disappointing for me. That is The Flame in the Mist. Can you see that? You can kind of see that. So this is by Renee Adia? I think her name is Adia. Again, I'm saying these names for the first time out loud. I'm really sorry. Flame in the Mist was sort of billed as a Mulan retelling, and it does have elements of that in there. It's more Mulan inspired, which didn't bother me, actually. I was okay with that. So it follows a young girl named Mariko, and she is going to be presented to the Emperor, I believe, as a bride. And her sort of entourage is attacked by assassins, and she manages to escape. Everyone thinks she's dead, but she has escaped, and she disguises herself as a boy to go and sort of figure out who tried to kill her. More power to her. This was just really disappointing, and I really hate to say it because I wanted to love it so much. I loved The Wrath and the Dawn, which is the other book by her that I read. And no, it just did not live up to this other series that she's written. Where The Wrath and the Dawn has this really incredibly strong, stubborn, but kind of perfectly balanced female character, Flame in the Mist didn't. I mean, Mariko spends most of the time saying the phrase, "I must prove my worth outside of the marriage market," over and over again. In fact, she said it so much that I kind of wanted to send assassins after her myself. She got really, really freaking annoying really quickly. All of the decisions that Mariko made, particularly at the beginning of the book, made no sense. She basically gets attacked. Everyone thinks she's dead. Everyone in her entourage is dead. Her maids are dead, her friend's dead, everybody's dead. And she's like, you know what would be a really good idea? I'm gonna disguise myself as a boy and hunt down the deadly assassins who tried to kill me. That doesn't make any sense. It really genuinely doesn't. So the whole premise of the book made no sense. And the fact that the rest of the plot was built on those terrible decisions just made the plot not really work for me. If I recall correctly, because I read this back in May, she had plenty of opportunities to sort of make good decisions, and she doesn't. She just keeps making bad decision after bad decision. And I just really, really struggled with that. So next up is a book that I don't think most people would have the same problems as me. I think that because my interests lie where they happen to lie, I found this book incredibly predictable. That's going to become a little bit less cryptic in a moment here. But the next book on the list is Everything, Everything by Nicole Yoon. You can't see that, can you? Oh well, use your imagination. So Everything, Everything is a contemporary YA novel, and it's about Maddie. And Maddie has this condition that you've probably seen in film or TV. It's incredibly rare. She's essentially allergic to the world, and she has to stay within her house, which has been completely sterilized. It's like a bubble. The only people that she ever interacts with are her mother and this sort of, not quite live-in nurse, but a nurse who comes to help out. She's completely homeschooled. All of her sort of life experience has either been in this house or online. One day, new neighbors move in next door, and lo and behold, new neighbors have a cute son. So the son, Ollie, and Maddie start to kind of develop this relationship that goes from kind of peeking out the window at each other to giving each other email addresses, you know, Taylor Swift style, and they begin this relationship and they begin to communicate. So I did a spoilery review on my blog if you'd like to read it, and I'll go into my reasons for not enjoying this book much there because it's really, really difficult to say why. However, I thought this book, which should not have been predictable whatsoever, was so insanely predictable. It was so predictable that I handed my copy to Scottish Fiancé and asked him to read the back and tell me exactly what happens and what the twist at the end is, and he was just like, oh yeah, it's this, and he was right. So this, again, is a little bit spoiler. It's so hard to talk about this book without spoilers, but the reason that I think I predicted what was going to happen in this book was because I do have an interest in true crime, and it reflects something that happened a few years ago. That's all I'm going to say. That might even be too spoilery. I don't know. I might cut that out. But regardless, I just really wanted to like this, and I didn't. I've heard such good things about her. I loved the illustrations in the book, which were done by her husband, which is super cute, and I love that. But it just didn't work for me. So this is the last of the, I don't own this book, so I'm going to attempt to show you on my iPad covers. This is a book by the queen of fairy tale retellings in YA. And this was the first book by her that I read. And I was told to kind of ignore it and read her regular series instead. I found this so disappointing and I wanted so badly to love it. So that was Heartless by Marissa Mayer. Oh, look, you can kind of see that. That's nice. It's such a cute cover and I loved the cover so much. It's beautiful, it's perfect, I loved it, it was wonderful. But the book was so meh. It was just so meh. And I actually ended up giving it away because it was so meh. So Heartless is about Kath, who will eventually grow up to be the Queen of Hearts. Off with her head, all that good stuff from Alice in Wonderland. That's not a spoiler. That's what the book is about. So this book chronicles Kath's early life. All she wants to do is be a baker. She wants to open a bakery. She's a wonderful, wonderful baker, and actually the descriptions of food in this book are probably the best part about it, and that's not even me being sarcastic. Genuinely, they were really good. So she's the child of nobility in Wonderland, and she's basically told that the King of Hearts wants to marry her. So she is spending a good portion of this book just dreading her marriage, and she meets this young man, of course, named Jest, and he is the court jester. I'm sure you probably figured that one out. And they have this kind of budding romance, and of course things don't end well because she ends up being one of my absolute favorite villains of all time. The big problem that I had with this book was that it was really boring. How can you have a book about the Queen of Hearts who just wants to bake cupcakes be boring? Okay, that probably sounds a little bit boring. I thought it sounded like it was gonna be fantastic though. I thought it would be so fun. And I'd heard such amazing things about the Lunar Chronicles, which is their big series, and this was a one-off standalone of its own. So I decided this would be a good place to start. I'm so upset that I didn't like it. It was so disappointing. My big issue is that you never got the sense that she was going to grow up to be this lunatic villain. You never got the sense that she was going to run around playing croquet and chopping off people's heads at will. Never. She doesn't even have a temper. She doesn't even have an anger problem. She's just a nice girl who overnight turns evil. And the parts where she is evil, which is very, very end of the book, were brilliant. They were so good and I loved that, but you saw no hint of it whatsoever. It's like a switch went off in her head. And I was really, really upset. I love seeing the origins of villains. I love reading about villains. The other thing that I didn't like about this was the romance. It was so like bland. It was so bland and boring, and he was so forgettable. I can just about remember his name. That's about it. I just really wanted to love this one. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really disappointed by this one. I just really wanted to love it, and I didn't. So the last book, or trilogy of books, on my list is probably the one that's going to make people most upset. I feel very alone in not liking these books, and I wish I did. I really wanted to. I love the author. She's an amazing person. I would really like to be her best friend. However, I just really, really did not like these. They were a huge letdown for me, especially as a fantasy reader. And that is the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. But in particular, I'm talking about the very first book, which is a darker shade of magic. So, Shades of Magic. 4 parallel universes. All of this book takes place in London, but there are various Londons. Every world is connected through London. So there is Red London, where our main hero is from. That's the world that has magic. Magic flourishes. It's a great thing. Most people can do magic. Magic is great. Then you have White London, where magic used to thrive, but now it's mostly gone, and the people who have it really fight for it. It's not a happy place. It's not a happy world. Then you have Grey London, which is most like our own. Doesn't have magic, never had magic, no one's really bothered by it. And then you have Black London, which we don't really talk about Black London. Essentially, magic destroyed the city and itself and the world. Black London is not a happy place. We don't go to Black London. So these books follow Kell, who is the adopted son of the royal family of Red London, and he is an Antari, which means that he is a very, very rare breed of magician. He can travel between the various worlds, between the Londons. So he is essentially a messenger in the service of the royal family. So the events of this book take place because Kell does a very bad thing, and he breaks the law, and he takes an item from Grey London into Red London. You're not allowed to take objects out of the worlds. They stay where they are. And there's a good reason for that, because chaos ensues for 3 books. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that I thought the second and third books were a big improvement on the the first one, and I'll get into that later. The reason that I did not enjoy this book was because it was, I think, very hyped. Everyone loves this. I'm not kidding when I say I feel very alone in not loving this book. My big problems come from Kel and Lila, which is a problem because there are two main characters. So Kel I'm much more forgiving about. He's basically a cardboard cutout in this book to me. He's just really bland, and he does improve dramatically over the next books. Lila Bard, I'm going to do my best to restrain myself because Lila Bard is probably my most hated character in books ever. I hate her more than I hate Dolores Umbridge. I hate her more than I hate Joffrey Baratheon. I hate her so much. And before anyone says anything, I am very much against the Mary Sue argument. Usually it's used to explain away very capable women. Lila is a Mary Sue. Lila gets to do things because she just really wants to do them. She goes head to head with magicians like Kel, who have literally been practicing magic all their lives, when she has been practicing magic for 6 months. She does things that she kind of wants to do just because, ooh, she really, really wants to do it, and that's really what explains what she does. And that is not okay. You need to follow the rules of your own magic system. That's the #1 rule in fantasy, and I don't feel like she did that in this book. Like I said, I think that the next 2 books in the trilogy were a big improvement because she didn't focus on the Wonder Twins, Kel and Lila. I loved Alucard. I thought he was brilliant. I loved Rye. I think it's Rye. I loved Rye. He was wonderful, and I was not expecting to like him from the first book. Things really improved in these 2, but that first book, oof. V.E. Schwab is an author who I will give another chance. Because as I said, I really like her as a human. She's super cool. I want to be her friend. We have a lot of things in common. But I just really didn't like these, and I'm really sorry, guys. I just really, really freaking hated that first book. Sorry. So that's it for books that disappointed me. If you are still here, again, if you like these books, that's totally cool. We can talk about it in a very nice, polite way, please. But it's just a shame that I was disappointed by these books, especially the ones that I really, really, really wanted to like. So if you have read any of these books, if you had any books that you were really disappointed by in 2017, definitely let me know. I would love to chat. And I'm gonna have more videos coming your way next week, so definitely stay tuned, and I will see you next time.